Marcus Walker slammed the hotel keycard down on the marble counter and turned to face the woman he was supposed to marry in front of 200 strangers. "Your mother didn't just book us a room," he said, his voice low and shaking. "She booked us one bed. And now your entire family thinks this is real." Emily Whitmore couldn't breathe. What started as one small lie to save her pride was about to expose every secret these two had buried for 2 long years, including the one truth neither of them had ever dared to say out loud. Before we begin, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. And if you love emotional stories about second chances, family, and the kind of love that shows up when you've stopped waiting for it, follow and subscribe now, because this journey is only getting started. The knock came at 7:42 in the morning, and Marcus Walker knew that knock anywhere. He knew it the way a man knows the sound of his own name. 3 quick taps, then a pause, then one more, like the person on the other side of the door had made a decision, and then, half a second later, started to regret it. He set down the lunchbox he was packing, wiped his hands on a dish towel, and crossed the small apartment. "Lily," he called over his shoulder, "brush your teeth. We leave in 10. "I already did." "Do it again. I can smell the pancake syrup from here." He heard his daughter groan and stomp back toward the bathroom, and he almost smiled. Almost. Because when he pulled the door open, the smile died on his face. Emily Whitmore stood in his hallway. And Emily Whitmore did not stand in hallways. She sat in corner offices. She stood at the head of conference tables. She walked into rooms full of men in expensive suits and made every one of them sit up a little straighter. In 2 years, Marcus had never once seen her outside the walls of Whitmore Industries, never at his home, never before 8 in the morning, and never ever looking like this. "Emily, before you say anything," she said, "I need coffee." He looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were red at the edges. Her hair, always perfect, was pushed behind her ears like she'd done it in a rush. She was holding her purse against her chest with both arms the way a person holds something when they don't know what else to do with their hands. "You showed up at my apartment before 8 in the morning asking for coffee," Marcus said slowly. "In my experience, that means somebody died or somebody made a very bad decision." She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "Unfortunately," she said, "it's the second one." He stepped back and let her in. "Uncle Marcus, is that your boss?" Lily's voice floated in from the hallway, loud enough for the whole building to hear. "She's not my go-get-your-backpack, sweetheart." "She's pretty." "Backpack." Emily's mouth twitched, the first crack of anything human on her face since she'd arrived. Marcus pointed her toward the kitchen table and started the coffee maker. "Talk," he said. "Can I sit down first?" "You can sit and talk. You're a very capable woman. I've seen you do 6 things at once." She sat. She set her purse on the table, folded her hands on top of it, and stared at them like they belonged to someone else. "Marcus, I need you to do something for me. And before you answer, I need you to remember that I have never, not once in 2 years, asked you for anything personal." That was true, and that was exactly what made his stomach tighten. "Okay," he said carefully. "I'm listening." Emily lifted her eyes to his. "I need you to pretend to be my fiancé." The coffee maker gurgled behind him. Somewhere down the hall, Lily was singing to herself, and Marcus stood in his own kitchen, a dish towel over his shoulder, absolutely certain he had misheard. "I'm sorry," he said. "My what? My fiancé?" "Your fake fiancé." "Yes." He laughed. Not because it was funny, nothing about her face was funny, but because his brain simply didn't have a better response ready. It was the kind of laugh a man gives when the ground shifts under his feet. "Emily, I fix office equipment for a living. I unjam copiers. I am not an actor." "I know. I've never even been in a school play." "I know that too." "Then why in the world would you pick me?" And there it was. The question landed and something in her face changed. She looked away. She looked at the coffee maker, at the refrigerator covered in Lily's crayon drawings, at anything but him. Whatever the real answer was, it scared her more than the question. "Because you're the only man I trust," she said quietly. The apartment went still. Marcus turned around and poured the coffee mostly so he'd have something to do with his hands. He set the mug in front of her. Black, no sugar. He'd known how she took it for 2 years, and he hadn't even had to think about it. "That's a dangerous thing to say to a man before he's had his own coffee," he said. "I mean it. I know you mean it. That's what makes it dangerous." He sat down across from her. "Start from the beginning. Slowly. Use small words. Pretend I unjam copiers for a living." She wrapped both hands around the mug. "My cousin is getting married this weekend. The whole family's flying in. My mother, my aunts, my sister, everyone." She paused. "And they all think I'm engaged." "To who?" "That's the problem." She closed her eyes. "To no one." Marcus set down his own mug. "Emily, I know. How does an entire family come to believe a person is engaged to no one?" She rubbed her forehead with 2 fingers the way she did in long meetings when someone said something she couldn't believe she had to correct. "6 months ago my mother called me, and she started in on the usual. Why aren't you married? Why are you always working? You're not getting any younger. Your sister already has 2 children." Emily's voice went flat and tired, the voice of a woman who had heard the same speech 100 times. "And I was in the middle of closing the biggest account of my career. I had 3 people waiting outside my office, and she would not stop." "So what did you tell her?" "I told her I was seeing someone." "Okay?" Marcus nodded. "That's normal. People say that. That's a normal thing to say to get your mother off the phone." "That's what I thought too." And then, Emily set the mug down. And then she got excited. Which you have to understand, my mother does not get excited. My mother has 2 settings: disappointed and slightly less disappointed. But she got excited, and she started asking questions. "How serious is it? When can we meet him?" And I panicked, and I said it was serious, and she asked how serious, and She stopped. "You what?" Marcus said. Emily looked down at her hands. "I sent her a ring emoji." There was a long silence. "You did not," Marcus said. I panicked. "You sent your mother a ring emoji." It was a very stressful day. "Emily." He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. "Your mother saw a little cartoon diamond on her phone and thought that you were engaged. She called my sister within the hour. My sister called my aunt. By dinner, the entire family knew I was getting married. To no one." "To no one." Marcus dragged a hand down his face. That is impressive. I want to be clear, I'm horrified, but I'm impressed." "Thank you," she said dryly. "It's a real gift." Down the hall, Lily appeared with her backpack on both shoulders and her shoes on the wrong feet. "Uncle Marcus, are you and the pretty boss lady in trouble?" "Grown-up talk, baby. Fix your shoes. And they're on the wrong feet." "They feel fine." "They're on the wrong feet, Lily." She sat down on the floor right there in the hallway to fix them, and Emily watched her with a look on her face Marcus couldn't quite name. Something soft. Something almost sad. "She's gotten so big," Emily said quietly. "That's what they do." He turned back to her. "So let me make sure I understand the situation. Your family thinks you're engaged. There's a wedding this weekend, and you need to show up with a man who can convince a room full of people that he's the one you're going to marry. Yes? For how long?" "1 weekend, Friday to Sunday. Dinner, the rehearsal, the ceremony. And then it's over, and I'll tell them we broke up, and everyone will move on." "Everyone will move on," Marcus repeated. "You clearly haven't met your own mother." "I've met her 39 years. That's why I'm here at 7 in the morning, terrified out of my mind." He studied her. And this was the part that got him, because Emily Whitmore was not a woman who came apart. He'd seen her lose a $2 million account and not blink. He'd seen her fire a man twice her age without her voice ever leaving that calm level register. But sitting at his kitchen table holding a mug of coffee, she wasn't drinking. She looked like a woman about to lose something that actually mattered to her. "Why does this scare you so much?" he asked. "It's a lie. You've told your mother 100 lies. Why is this one different? Emily was quiet for a long moment. Because if I show up alone, she said, she wins. She'll look at me across that table with all my aunts watching, and she'll do that thing with her mouth, that little tight smile, and she'll say something like, well, we all knew it wouldn't last, and everyone will nod. And for the rest of the weekend, I'll be the sad one, the successful one who couldn't hold on to a man. And I have spent my entire life being the daughter who wasn't quite enough, and I will not walk into that room and hand her one more reason. She stopped a little breathless. She hadn't meant to say all of it. Marcus could see that on her face. He didn't say anything for a moment. He just let the words sit there. Okay, he finally said. So this isn't about the wedding. No, it's about not letting her see you lose. Emily's eyes came up to his, and there was something grateful in them, something a little bit stunned. You always do that, she said. Do what? See the thing underneath the thing. I unjam copiers, he said. You'd be amazed what people tell the guy fixing the copier. That got a real laugh out of her, small but real. And Marcus felt it land somewhere in his chest that he immediately decided to ignore. Why me? He asked again. Not to be cruel. He needed to hear it. You know powerful men, Emily. You could ask anyone. Men who look the part. Men who wear the right watch. Why the guy from the equipment floor? She looked at him for a long time. Because everyone else sees what I have, she said. They see the title, the company, the Whitmore name. They walk into my office and they see a resume. Her voice dropped. You've seen me at 9 o'clock at night when everyone's gone home, and I'm still at my desk pretending I'm not lonely. You saw me the day my father passed, and I came to work anyway because I didn't know where else to go. You've never once looked at me like I was something you could use. She swallowed. You just see me. And if I'm going to survive 3 days of pretending I need someone next to me who already knows the real thing. The kitchen was very quiet. Marcus knew that the smart thing, the safe thing, was to say no. He was a single father. She was his boss. There was a line between them for 100 good reasons, and every one of those reasons was still true. But there was also a woman sitting at his table who had never asked him for anything, asking him for this. Okay, he said. Emily blinked. Okay. One weekend. Marcus, are you? One weekend? He said. But there are rules. She let out a breath that seemed to take 10 pounds off her shoulders, and something bright came into her eyes. Rules, she said. You're negotiating with your boss. No, right now I'm negotiating with a woman who wants me to lie to her entire family. That's a very different relationship. Fair. She sat up straighter, and for the first time all morning she looked like herself. What are the rules? He held up a finger. 1. No embarrassing stories. You don't get to tell people I cried at some movie. You don't get to invent a version of me that says babe. I have dignity. Agreed. 2. A second finger. No elaborate fake proposal. I don't want to stand in front of your family and describe how I supposedly hired a string quartet and got down on one knee at sunset. I'll forget the details, and then we're finished. Keep it simple. We fell for each other slowly. That's a story I can actually tell. Something flickered across Emily's face at that, but she nodded. Simple. Done. 3. He looked her dead in the eye. You do not under any circumstances tell your mother that we are planning to have children. Emily immediately looked at the table. Marcus went very still. Emily. What? Why did you look at the table? I didn't. You absolutely looked at the table. She may have asked, Emily said in a very small voice, how many I wanted. Your mother asked how many children you're having with your imaginary fiancé, and whether we'd want them close in age. Marcus put both hands over his face. And I said 2, Emily added, a boy and a girl, and that we'd probably start soon because I'm not getting any younger. I need, Marcus said through his hands, so many more rules. And Emily Whitmore laughed a real laugh, head tipped back, the kind of laugh he was certain most people in her life had never once heard. And Marcus lowered his hands and watched her do it, and he felt something dangerous settle in his chest, because he liked making her laugh. He liked it far, far too much for a man who was only supposed to be doing a favor. "Uncle Marcus!" Lily called from the hall, shoes now on the correct feet. "We're going to be late for school." "I'll take her," Emily said, standing suddenly. "I mean, if that's okay. It's on the way. And then you and I need to talk about our story before Friday. We have a lot to build." Marcus looked at his daughter, who was already looking up at Emily with open, hopeful wonder, the way kids look at someone they've decided to like. "You want to ride with the pretty boss lady?" he asked. "Yes," Lily said. "That settles that." The next 2 days were a crash course in a marriage that didn't exist. They met at a diner after work on Wednesday and built a history from nothing. Where they met the office, that part was easy. When it changed from work to something more, a late night, a shared elevator, a conversation that went longer than it should have, they memorized details. The name of the restaurant where he asked her to be exclusive. The color of the dress she wore on their first real date. Small, sturdy lies, the kind that hold weight because they're specific. "What's my father's name?" Emily quizzed him. Your father was named Robert. He passed 3 years ago." "Hart. You don't talk about him much, but when you do, your voice changes." She stopped her pen halfway to the notepad between them. "I never told you how he died," she said. "You told me the day it happened. You didn't mean to. You said you'd be out for a few days, and then you said, 'My father's heart just stopped this morning.' And then you left before I could say anything." He looked at her. "I remembered." Emily stared at him across the sticky diner table for a long moment. "You're going to be very good at this," she said quietly. "I'm a little worried about how good I'm going to be at this," he admitted. She didn't ask what he meant. Maybe she already knew. Friday came, whether they were ready or not. Marcus dropped Lily off at his sister's, kissed the top of her head twice, and drove 3 hours toward a life he was about to pretend was his. Emily sat in the passenger seat with a folder in her lap, going over names one more time, which aunt, not to discuss politics, with which uncle would try to sell him insurance, which cousin was the bride, and would be too stressed to interrogate anyone. "You're nervous," Marcus said, eyes on the road. "I'm strategic. You've read that folder 4 times. Your hands are shaking." She closed the folder. "If this goes wrong," she said, "it doesn't just embarrass me. It embarrasses me in front of every person whose opinion I've been chasing my whole life. Do you understand what that is? It's not one bad weekend. It's proof. It's them getting to be right about me forever." Marcus reached over. He didn't plan it. His hand just moved and rested it on top of hers. "Hey," he said. "Look at me." She looked. "I have never once let you down at that office. Not in 2 years. Not one time. Whatever you needed, I showed up. You know that." "I know that. So I'm not going to start letting you down now in front of your mother at your cousin's wedding. That's not who I am." He put his hand back on the wheel. "We walk in there together. We hold the line together. And on Sunday, I drive you home, and you get to be right about yourself for once, instead of everyone else." Emily didn't say anything for a mile. "You're a good man, Marcus Walker," she finally said. "I've been told," he said. "Usually by copiers, right before they jam." She laughed, and the tension in the car finally broke, and for the length of one highway exit, it almost felt easy. The hotel was the kind of place where the doormen wore gloves and the lobby smelled like fresh flowers and money. Marcus barely had time to take it in before it happened. There she is. A woman was crossing the lobby toward them, and Marcus knew before Emily even stiffened beside him exactly who it was. Same posture, same way of walking, like the room belonged to her. But where Emily's face could go soft, this woman's had set into something harder years ago. Margaret Whitmore, the mother, and she was crying. "Mom," Emily started, "we just—" But Margaret wasn't looking at her daughter. She was looking at their hands. And that's when Marcus realized that somewhere between the car and the lobby doors, Emily had taken his hand. Their fingers were laced together. Neither of them had decided to do it. It had simply happened the way it had happened at the kitchen table, the way it seemed to keep happening. "Oh my goodness," Margaret breathed. "It's really him." "Mrs. Whitmore," Marcus said, extending his free hand. "It's an honor to finally—" She didn't take his hand. She hugged him. She wrapped both arms around him right there in the middle of the lobby, and Marcus stood frozen with Emily's hand still locked in his. And this crying woman pressed against his chest, and over the top of her head he met Emily's eyes. "This is already going badly," he mouthed. "You have no idea," she mouthed back. Margaret pulled away and held Marcus at arm's length, inspecting him the way a woman inspects fruit at a market. "You're older than I expected," she said. "Mom, I mean that as a compliment. The young ones don't stay." She turned to Emily, dabbing at her eyes. "I was beginning to think you invented him." Emily's laugh came out about half a second too fast. "Why would I invent him? You've done stranger things." Margaret waved a hand and pulled a key card from her purse. "Now, I took care of your room myself, the garden suite, the best one in the whole hotel, nothing but the best for my daughter and her fiancé." "Mom, about the room." "Don't argue with me. You always argue." Margaret pressed the key card into Marcus's hand and closed his fingers over it. "You two have been apart with all your travel and your work. This weekend you should be together, properly." Marcus looked at the key card. Emily looked at the key card. Then they both very slowly looked at Margaret. "When you say the best room," Marcus said carefully, How many beds does the best room have?" Margaret smiled. It was the exact tight little smile Emily had described in his kitchen 2 days ago. "1," she said. "You're engaged, aren't you?" And she patted him on the cheek, told them dinner was at 7 and not to be late, and walked back across the lobby, leaving Marcus Walker standing there, holding a keycard to a room with 1 bed, with the woman he was pretending to marry in front of a family that now believed every word of a lie he'd agreed to tell for reasons he was no longer entirely sure of. Emily leaned in close, her voice barely a whisper against his shoulder. "I can explain." "You cannot," Marcus whispered back, "possibly explain this. Give me 20 minutes. Emily, there is 1 bed, 1. I did the math in the car about a lot of things. That was not one of the things I did the math on. I know. I have rules. I made rules. None of my rules covered this." "I know, Marcus." He looked down at her, at this woman who ran an entire division of a company, who terrified grown men in boardrooms now looking up at him with something in her eyes he'd never seen there before. Not the boss. Not the cold, untouchable director everyone whispered about. Just Emily. A little scared. A little hopeful. Standing much too close. And Marcus Walker realized, holding that key card in that beautiful lobby, that the hardest part of this weekend was not going to be lying to her family. It was going to be lying to himself. The elevator doors closed, and for the first time since the lobby, Marcus and Emily were alone. Neither of them spoke. Marcus watched the floor numbers climb. Emily stared straight ahead at her own reflection in the polished metal doors. And between them, held in Marcus's hand, was the key card to a garden suite with exactly 1 bed. "So," Marcus said finally, "don't." "I'm just going to say the number out loud one time." Marcus. 1 bed. I heard my mother the first time." He turned to look at her. "Emily, in the car I planned for a lot of things. I planned for the fake proposal story. I planned for your uncle who sells insurance. I planned 3 separate answers for how we supposedly met in case somebody asked twice." He held up the key card. "I did not plan for this." Emily pressed the heel of her hand against her forehead. "I'll sleep on the floor." "You're not sleeping on the floor." "Then you'll sleep on the floor. I'm a grown man. I'm not sleeping on a hotel floor for 2 nights, so your mother thinks we're—" He stopped because the elevator dinged and the doors opened onto a hallway with soft carpet and gold light, and a couple was standing there waiting to get on. The couple looked at them, waited. "After you," Marcus said smoothly, and put his hand on the small of Emily's back to guide her out. He felt her go stiff under his palm. Then half a second later, he felt her lean into it just slightly, because the couple was still watching, and they were supposed to be in love. They walked down the hall in silence until they found the door. Marcus swiped the card. The light blinked green, and they stepped inside. The suite was enormous, and in the center of it, impossible to ignore, was one very large, very single bed. Emily set her bag down. "Okay, we're adults. This is fine. We'll figure it out." "We'll figure it out," Marcus repeated. "There's a couch." "There's a couch that's the size of a park bench, Emily." "You're taller than the couch. I'm shorter than the couch. I'll take the couch." "You're going to walk into a rehearsal dinner in an hour with a crick in your neck, and your mother is going to ask why, and what are you going to say? My fiancé made me sleep on the couch on the first night." Emily opened her mouth, closed it. He had her there. "Fine," she said. "We'll deal with it tonight. Right now we have a bigger problem. Dinner is in 55 minutes and my entire family is going to be sitting at that table trying to figure out if you're real." And just like that, the small problem of the bed disappeared, replaced by a much larger one. Marcus loosened his tie in the mirror, then tightened it again. "How many of them are there? At dinner tonight, maybe 15. The close family." 15. He nodded slowly. "And how many of them want this to fail?" Emily paused her hand on the zipper of her garment bag. "That's a very sharp question," she said. "You said your mother wants to be right about you. That means at least some of these people are hoping I say the wrong thing, so I need to know, who's watching me the hardest?" Emily sat down on the edge of the bed, and for a moment she wasn't performing anything. She was just thinking. "My sister," she said. "Vanessa. She's the bride's older sister. No, wait, she's my sister. The wedding is our cousin's. Vanessa's married. 2 kids. Perfect house. And she has spent my whole life needing me to be the one who has less. If I have the career, then she needs to have the family. If I have both." Emily shook her head. "She won't let me have both. She'll test you all weekend." "Okay, Vanessa. Who else?" "My mother, obviously. But my mother's already decided you're real. She cried in the lobby. That actually works in our favor. She'll defend you now, because if you're fake, then she cried over nothing in front of everyone, and my mother would rather die than be embarrassed." Marcus almost laughed. "So your mother's pride is protecting us. For now." "And the wild card." Emily hesitated, and Marcus watched her hesitate, and he knew there was one more name, and he knew it was the one that mattered. "Daniel," she said. "Who's Daniel?" She stood up, pulled her dress out of the garment bag, and didn't look at him. "He'll be there tonight," she said. "And I should have told you about him before now. I'm sorry. I didn't think he'd come." "Emily, who is Daniel?" She took a breath. "Daniel is the man I was actually supposed to marry," she said. 4 years ago, before I became a director, before any of it." She smoothed the dress over her arm, still not meeting his eyes. "He left me 11 days before the wedding. Invitations were already out. My mother had already paid for the flowers." Her voice was very flat, very controlled, the boardroom voice she used when she didn't want anyone to see what was underneath. "He said I was married to my job. He said I'd never make room for a person. And then he moved across the country, and I never saw him again." Marcus stood very still. "And he's coming to this wedding." "He's the groom's business partner. They're close. I found out yesterday. I almost called the whole thing off." She finally looked up. "But I couldn't. Because if I cancel now, everyone knows I ran. From him. Again." And there it was. The real reason. Not her mother. Not Vanessa. Not the ring emoji. Daniel. Marcus set down his tie completely and crossed the room to stand in front of her. "Emily, look at me." She looked. That's why you needed someone you trust, he said quietly. Not just anyone who looks the part. Someone who wouldn't flinch when the man who left you walks into the room. Someone who'd stay. Emily's chin trembled just barely, just once before she caught it. Yes, she whispered. You should have told me 2 days ago. I know. I was afraid you'd say no. I already said yes. He put his hands on her shoulders, steady, sure the way he did everything. And I don't take things back, not with you. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to walk into that dinner, and when Daniel looks at you, and they always do, he's not going to see the woman he left. He's going to see a woman who is so completely fine without him that she found someone better. Emily let out a shaky breath that was almost a laugh. You're very confident for a man who unjams copiers. You'd be amazed what you learn about people fixing their copiers. He squeezed her shoulders once and let go. Now get dressed. We've got a family to fool and an ex to bury. 40 minutes later, they walked into the private dining room together, and every head at the table turned. Marcus felt Emily's hand find his, and this time, he was ready for it. He laced their fingers together like it was the most natural thing in the world. And he smiled, the easy, warm smile of a man who had absolutely nothing to hide. Everyone, Margaret announced, beaming. This is Marcus. There was a chorus of hellos. Marcus lifted his free hand in a friendly wave, and his eyes swept the table, cataloging faces, the way Emily had taught him. The aunt who'd talk politics, the uncle with the insurance, the stressed bride, And then he saw him, a man near the end of the table, mid-40s, good suit, the kind of handsome that knew it was handsome. He wasn't smiling with the others. He was watching Emily, just watching with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read, but didn't like at all. Daniel. Marcus felt Emily's grip tighten around his fingers hard enough to hurt, and he understood that she'd seen him too. Without missing a beat, Marcus lifted their joined hands, pressed a slow kiss to the back of Emily's knuckles, and murmured just loud enough for the table to hear, "Sit down, sweetheart. I'll get your chair." A soft awe went up from two of the aunts, and across the table, Daniel's jaw tightened. Round 1. They sat. Marcus pulled out Emily's chair, pushed it in, took the seat beside her. Under the table out of sight, he kept his hand resting on her knee. Not romantic. Not for show, just there. Steady. A pressure that said, "I've got you." And he felt some of the tension go out of her leg. "So, Marcus," said Vanessa, and there it was, the sister leaning forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We've heard absolutely nothing about you. Emily's kept you a complete secret." "Have I?" Emily said lightly. "You have. So tell us. What do you do?" The table went quiet. This was the first test, and everyone at it knew it. Marcus had rehearsed a dozen answers. He'd built a whole fake career in his head consultant that's something impressive enough to survive a Whitmore dinner. And in the 2 seconds before he spoke, he threw all of it away. "I fix office equipment," he said. The silence changed shape. Emily's hand froze on the table. Vanessa's eyebrows went up, delighted. I'm sorry. You fix office equipment. Copiers mostly. Printers. The big machines that jam when you need them most." Marcus smiled easy and unbothered. "It's how Emily and I met, actually. Her floor's copier went down the day of a huge presentation. She came down to the equipment room herself, didn't send an assistant, didn't wait because she needed it fixed, and she wasn't going to sit around waiting for someone else to solve her problem." He looked at Emily, and the look was real. I'd never met anyone like her. Most people at that company wouldn't have known where the equipment room was. She walked in like she owned the place, which she kind of does. A couple of the uncles chuckled. "And I told her it'd take an hour," Marcus went on. "And she said she had 40 minutes, so I fixed it in 35, and she looked at me like I'd performed surgery, and she said..." He glanced at Emily. "What did you say, honey?" Emily's mouth opened. She had no idea what she'd said, because none of this had happened. But she'd learned in 2 days to trust him, so she said, "I said thank you." You said, "You just saved my entire quarter," Marcus corrected gently. "And then you gave me your card, and it took me 3 weeks to work up the nerve to call the number on it." He shrugged. "I'm not a rich man, Vanessa. I don't have a big title. But I show up. And I think somewhere along the way, your sister decided that mattered more than the rest of it." The table was silent, but it was a different silence now. Margaret was dabbing her eyes again. Even one of the aunts had her hand pressed to her chest. And Vanessa, who had leaned in to watch a man crumble, sat back slowly, because he hadn't crumbled at all. He'd told the truth, a truth so plain and so unashamed that there was nothing to attack. But at the end of the table, Daniel spoke for the first time. "That's a nice story," he said. "It's just funny because Emily always said she'd never date anyone from work. She used to be very firm about that. Boundaries, she called it." He took a sip of his wine, eyes on Emily now, not Marcus. "People change, I guess." The temperature at the table dropped 10 degrees. Emily's face didn't move, but Marcus felt her go rigid beside him, and he understood in that moment exactly what kind of man Daniel was. Not loud, not obvious. The kind who slid the knife in sideways and smiled while he did it. So Marcus set down his fork. "I'm sorry," he said pleasantly. "I don't think we've met. You are Daniel. I'm a friend of the groom. Marcus, I'm marrying Emily." He said it warmly, but there was iron underneath, and everyone heard it. "And you're right, people do change. She told me she used to have a rule about dating people from work, and I asked her why she broke it." He turned and looked at Emily, and his voice softened into something that didn't feel like acting at all. "You want to tell him what you told me, or should I?" Emily looked at him, and whatever she saw in his face gave her the answer. "I told him," Emily said slowly, "that I'd spent years dating men who wanted my name and my title and my father's company, and that the first time someone looked at me and saw a person instead of a resume." Her voice caught, and she wasn't sure anymore if she was acting either. "I wasn't going to let a rule get in the way of that." The table was dead silent. Daniel's smile was gone. Margaret reached across and squeezed Emily's hand. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered. And Marcus under this table felt Emily's fingers thread through his and hold on like she was holding on for real. Round 2, and it wasn't even close. Dinner went on, the tension eased. Aunts asked about the wedding date they hadn't set, and Marcus deflected smoothly. "We're not rushing it, we want to do it right." Uncles asked about Lily, and Emily jumped in before Marcus could, talking about his daughter with a warmth and detail that surprised even him, because she wasn't inventing any of it. She knew Lily. She knew her favorite color, and the gap in her front teeth, and the way she said, "Uncle Marcus," like it was one word. She'd been paying attention for 2 years, and Marcus, listening to the woman he was pretending to marry describe his real daughter with real love, felt that dangerous thing in his chest again, bigger this time, harder to ignore. He excused himself before dessert, said he needed the restroom. He needed a minute more than a restroom, but nobody had to know that. He was standing at the sink, both hands braced against the counter, looking at himself in the mirror, and quietly asking himself what exactly he thought he was doing when the door opened behind him. It was Daniel. Of course it was. Marcus, right? Daniel walked to the sink beside him, turned on the water, didn't wash his hands. Good performance out there. Marcus met his eyes in the mirror. It wasn't a performance. Sure it wasn't. Daniel smiled. Look, I'm going to do you a favor because I don't think you know what you're getting into. I was engaged to that woman. I know her. And I'm telling you from experience, she doesn't actually let people in. She lets you think she does. She'll give you just enough to keep you around, and then one day you'll look up and realize you've been standing outside a locked door for 3 years, and she never once had any intention of opening it. He shut off the water. I got out. You still can. Marcus turned to face him fully, and for a moment he said nothing. Then very calmly he said, You left her 11 days before your wedding. Daniel's face flickered. The flowers were already paid for, Marcus went on. The invitations were already out, and you looked at a woman who'd let you all the way in because she did, didn't she? That's the part that still bothers you, and you decided she wasn't worth staying for. And now, 4 years later, you're standing in a bathroom telling her new fiancé that she's the one who can't let people in. Marcus shook his head slowly. That's not a warning, Daniel. That's a confession. You're not trying to save me. You're trying to feel better about the worst thing you ever did. The bathroom was very, very quiet. You don't know anything about it, Daniel said, but his voice had lost its edge. I know she's the strongest person I've ever met, and I know she's spent 4 years believing she scared you off because she was too much. Marcus straightened his jacket. And I know that's a lie you let her carry so you wouldn't have to carry the truth. Enjoy the wedding. He walked out. His hands were shaking, and he didn't fully understand why he'd said all of it, why he'd defended her that hard, why it had felt less like acting and more like something clawing its way up out of his own chest. But when he came back to the table and sat down, Emily looked at him, and something in his face must have shown because she leaned in close. What happened? She whispered. Nothing, he said. Your ex just tried to give me relationship advice. Her eyes widened. What did you say? I told him to enjoy the wedding. Emily stared at him, and then slowly she smiled. Not the boardroom smile, not the polite dinner smile, but the real one. The one from his kitchen, the one that did things to his chest he'd stopped pretending it didn't. You're a very dangerous man, Marcus Walker, she said. You have no idea, he said, and he meant it more than she knew. Dinner ended. Good nights were said. Margaret hugged Marcus again, a long one this time, whispering, "Thank you for making her happy," against his shoulder. And Marcus felt the lie of it land like a stone in his stomach because he wasn't making her happy. He was renting it for the weekend, and the difference had never felt sharper. And then finally, they were back in the elevator, and then back in the suite, and then it was just the two of them, and one bed, and a silence neither of them knew how to fill. Emily kicked off her heels and sat down on the edge of the bed. You were incredible tonight. I had good material. No. She looked up at him. You were incredible. What you said to Vanessa. What you said at the table. About seeing a person instead of a resume. She paused. Where did that come from? Marcus took off his jacket, hung it over the back of the tiny couch, and didn't answer right away. You told me that, he finally said. In the car, and this morning, and 100 times over 2 years in little pieces without ever meaning to. He turned to look at her. I didn't make anything up tonight, Emily. I just repeated things you'd already said. I've been listening for a long time. The room went quiet, and this was the moment Marcus could feel it, the way you feel the air change before a storm. This was the moment where something could tip over, where 2 years of boundaries and 1 weekend of pretending could collapse into whatever was underneath. Emily opened her mouth, and her phone rang. She jumped, grabbed it off the nightstand, looked at the screen, and her whole body changed, went stiff, went cold, went back to being the director. It's my mother, she said. At 11 o'clock, Emily answered. Mom is everything? She stopped, listened, and Marcus watched the color drain out of her face. What? No. No, that's not Mom who told you that. Marcus stood up. When? Emily's voice had gone very thin. Tonight? He said that tonight. She closed her eyes. No, Mom. Listen to me. That's not true. I don't know why he'd say that. A pause. I'll call you in the morning, I promise. Get some sleep. She hung up. She didn't move. Emily, Marcus said. What was that? She set the phone down very slowly like it might break. Daniel, she said. After dinner. He went to my mother. Her voice was hollow. He told her he'd done some checking, that you don't have any money, that you're a single father who fixes copiers for an hourly wage. She looked up at him, and there was something terrible in her eyes, not for herself, he realized, for him. He told my mother that you're only marrying me for the Whitmore money, and that she should protect the family before it's too late. Marcus went cold. And my mother, Emily said, believed him. The silence stretched between them. So tomorrow, Emily continued, her voice starting to shake. At the rehearsal in front of everyone, my mother is going to be watching you, testing you, looking for proof that she couldn't even say it, that you're using me. And if she finds it, she'll expose you at the wedding, in front of 200 people, to protect me from the gold digger I brought home. A brittle, awful laugh escaped her. Do you understand what he did? He didn't just attack me. He aimed at the one thing about you that's actually true. You do fix copiers. You are a single father. You're not rich. Everything he told her is real, and I dragged you into this, and now they're going to humiliate you for being exactly the good man that you are. She put her face in her hands, and Marcus stood there in a suite with one bed, holding the weight of what he'd just walked into. He'd come here to protect her pride. That was the deal. One weekend, one lie, hold the line, drive home Sunday. Simple. It was not simple anymore. He crossed the room. He crouched down in front of her, gently pulled her hands away from her face and held them. Emily, look at me. She looked. Her eyes were wet. I'm not going anywhere, he said. You hear me? A man tried to scare me off in a bathroom tonight, and I didn't blink. Your mother can test me all weekend. She can look for proof. She's not going to find it because there isn't any. He held her gaze steadily. I'm not using you. I have never once used you. And tomorrow, when she's watching me, she's going to see a man who's exactly what he says he is. Because that's the one thing I can do better than any rich man in that room. His voice dropped. I can be real. Emily's tears spilled over. Why are you doing this? She whispered. It was supposed to be one favor. This is so much more than a favor now. Why are you still here? And Marcus opened his mouth to answer, and realized he didn't have a safe one. The true answer was sitting right there at the front of his chest, had been building for 2 years, had cracked wide open at that dinner table tonight, and he almost said it. Instead he said, because you're my friend, and you don't leave your friends to face the wolves alone. It wasn't the whole truth. They both knew it wasn't, but it was the part he was allowed to say. Emily nodded, wiping her face. Okay, she said. Okay. She took a breath, pulled herself together the way she always did, brick by brick, until the director was back in place. We should sleep, she said. Tomorrow's going to be a war. Yeah. Marcus stood. He looked at the one bed. She looked at the one bed. I'll take the couch, they both said at the same time. And despite everything, despite Daniel, despite Margaret, despite the trap closing in around them, they both laughed. Tired, cracked, real laughter. We'll share the bed, Emily said. We're adults. There's a pillow wall. I trust you. You trust me, Marcus repeated. You're the only man I trust. I told you that on Thursday, and I meant it. She stood, grabbed a pillow, and set it firmly down the center of the mattress like a border between two countries. Your side, my side. Geneva Convention. No crossing. Understood. They got ready in shifts. Lay down on opposite sides of the pillow wall. Turned off the light. And in the dark, staring at the ceiling of a room he never should have been in, pretending to be a man he wasn't, for a family that already hated him. Marcus Walker listened to Emily breathing 3 feet away and understood something with total, terrifying clarity. The lie had a shape now. It had teeth. Tomorrow her mother would try to prove he was a fraud, and the cruel joke of it was that she was right about one thing and wrong about everything that mattered. He was pretending to be Emily's fiancé. He just wasn't pretending to love her. Marcus? Emily's voice came softly through the dark. Yeah. Thank you. For tonight. For all of it. He stared at the ceiling. Get some sleep, Emily, he said. And on the other side of a pillow that suddenly felt very thin, neither of them slept for a long, long time. Marcus woke at 6:14 in the morning to the sound of Emily already awake. She wasn't moving. She was just lying on her side of the pillow wall, staring at the ceiling, and he could tell from her breathing that she'd been doing it for a while. You didn't sleep, he said quietly. I slept. Emily. An hour? Maybe. She turned her head toward him. The pillow wall was still there between them, but somewhere in the night it had gotten flatter, pushed down, and neither of them mentioned it. I've been lying here running through every version of today, every way it goes wrong. And they all end the same way. She sat up, pulling the blanket around her. My mother catches you in something, some small thing. The wrong fork, the wrong answer, a slip about your salary. And she uses it to pull the thread until the whole thing comes apart. She's good at it, Marcus. She's been doing it my whole life. She can smell a lie from across a room. Marcus sat up too, ran a hand through his hair. Then we don't give her a lie to smell, he said. What does that mean? It means we stop trying to make me look like something I'm not. He turned to face her. Last night at dinner, when did we win? Not when I sounded impressive, when I told the truth. When I said I fix copiers, when you said the thing about the resume. Every time we handed them something real, they had nothing to push against. He shrugged. So today, when your mother comes at me, we don't run. We don't hide the copier job or the hourly wage or Lily or the small apartment. We put it all on the table, because you can't expose a man who's already told you everything. Emily was quiet for a moment. That's either the smartest thing you've ever said, she murmured, or it's going to get us both killed. Probably both. She almost smiled. Then her phone buzzed on the nightstand, and the almost smile died. She looked at the screen. It's my mother, she said. A text. She read it. Marcus watched her face go still. She wants to have breakfast, just the two of us, this morning, before the rehearsal. That's not breakfast, Marcus said. No. Emily set the phone down. That's an interrogation. 90 minutes later, Marcus stood at the window of the suite, not looking at anything, just standing, while Emily got ready to go downstairs and sit across from her mother alone. He'd wanted to come. She'd said no. If Margaret wanted her alone, then bringing him would look like he was afraid to let her out of his sight, and that would only confirm what Daniel had planted. You'll be fine, he told her, though his stomach was in a knot. I know how to handle my mother. She was checking her reflection, smoothing her blouse, arming herself. The question is whether I can do it without giving anything away. She turned to him. If she asks me something and I don't have the answer we agreed on, if I hesitate, if I look away, then you tell her the truth about the thing underneath, even if the fact is a lie. Marcus stepped toward her. She's not testing whether the facts line up, Emily. She's testing whether you love me. That's the real question under all of it. So don't perform the facts, just don't lie about that part. Emily went very still. Don't lie about that part, she repeated slowly. Right. She looked at him for a long second, something unreadable moving behind her eyes, and then she nodded once sharp and walked out the door. And she did not think about how easy it had been to hear him say, "Don't lie about loving me," and feel her chest go tight for a reason that had nothing to do with strategy. Downstairs, Margaret was already seated at a corner table when Emily arrived, 2 coffees poured, 1 black, exactly the way Emily took it. Her mother had ordered for her. Her mother always ordered for her. Sit, Margaret said. Emily sat. You look tired. I didn't sleep well. Weddings do that. Margaret took a sip of her coffee, watching her daughter over the rim of the cup. And Emily knew this game had grown up inside it. The silence first. Let the other person fill it. Let them get nervous and say too much. So Emily said nothing. She picked up her coffee and waited. It was Margaret who broke first, which almost never happened. He seems like a nice man, Margaret said. He is. The story last night, the copier. A pause. It was very charming. It's true. Is it? Margaret set down her cup. Because a man came to me last night, Emily. A man who was very concerned about you. And he told me some things that I've been sitting with all night, and I need you to look me in the eye and tell me they're not true. Here it was. Emily set down her coffee too, met her mother's eyes. Which man, Mom? Does it matter? It matters a great deal to me which man decided to whisper about my fiancé at my cousin's rehearsal dinner. Margaret's jaw tightened. She didn't want to say the name. And that told Emily everything that her mother knew on some level, that the source was rotten. Daniel, Margaret admitted. Emily let the name sit there in the air between them. Daniel, she repeated softly. The man who left me 11 days before our wedding, after you'd paid for the flowers, that Daniel, he came to you, and you listened to him. Margaret's face flickered. That was 4 years ago. You paid for those flowers, Mom, and you never once asked him why. You asked me. Do you remember what you asked me? You asked me what I'd done. Emily's voice didn't rise, but it sharpened every word a needle. The man who humiliated me and my family walks up to you at a wedding, and your first instinct after 4 years is still to believe him over me. The silence at the table was total, and Marcus upstairs had no idea that his advice was working, that by refusing to perform by simply telling the true thing underneath, Emily had just turned her mother's interrogation completely around. Margaret looked for the first time in Emily's memory genuinely off balance. He said Marcus doesn't have money, Margaret said, but there was less certainty in it now. That he fixes copiers, that he's a single father, that he's after the family's... All of that is true, Emily said. Margaret blinked. What? He does fix copiers. He is a single father. He isn't rich. Every fact Daniel gave you is correct. Emily leaned forward. And Daniel handed you those facts like they were dirt, because he knew you'd hear poor and single father and get scared. He aimed at exactly the thing he knew would frighten you. That's the part you should be sitting with all night, Mom. Not whether Marcus is rich. Whether the man you trusted enough to believe was trying to hurt me on purpose. Margaret's hands had gone still around her coffee cup. His name is Marcus Walker. Emily continued, and now the words were coming from somewhere she hadn't planned, somewhere real. He has a daughter named Lily who's 7 and has a gap in her front teeth and calls me the pretty boss lady. He wakes up before the sun every morning to pack her lunch. He's never been late to a single thing in the 2 years I've known him. When my father died, Marcus was the only person at that entire company who looked at me like I was a person who'd lost someone instead of a director who needed to get back to work. Her voice cracked just slightly. You want to know if he's after our money? He fixed my copier, and it took him 3 weeks to work up the nerve to call me, because he was afraid I'd think a man like him wasn't good enough for a woman like me. That's who Daniel tried to make you afraid of. Margaret was quiet for a very long time, and then softly she said something that stopped Emily cold. You never talked about Daniel like that. Emily froze. What? When you were engaged to Daniel, you talked about the wedding, the venue, the guest list, the dress. Margaret's eyes had gone glassy. You never once talked about him. Not the way you just talked about this man. In 4 years, I have never heard you speak about anyone the way you just spoke about Marcus Walker. She reached across the table and took Emily's hand. I came here to protect you. And I think I've just watched my daughter fall in love in real time, and she doesn't even know it yet. Emily's mouth went dry, because it was supposed to be a performance. Every word of it. She'd built it to save the lie. And somewhere in the middle of defending a fake fiancé to her mother, she'd told the truth without meaning to, and her mother, her sharp, impossible, all-seeing mother, had heard it before she had. Mom, Emily started. That's not... Don't. Margaret squeezed her hand. Don't explain it to me. I'm your mother. I've been waiting 9 years to see you look like that. I'm not going to let you talk yourself out of it. She sat back dabbing at her eyes with her napkin, and just like that, the interrogation was over, and something else had taken its place. Now, I owe that man an apology for even entertaining Daniel's poison, and I intend to give it to him at the rehearsal in front of everyone, so there's no confusion about where this family stands. Emily walked back up to the suite in a daze. Marcus was waiting by the door, and the second he saw her face, he crossed the room. What happened? Are you okay? What did she apologized. Emily said. Or she's going to. At the rehearsal. In front of everyone. She sat down on the edge of the bed, still stunned. She turned completely around, Marcus. She went from hunting you to defending you in the space of 1 cup of coffee. Marcus let out a breath. That's good. That's great. So how did you do it? Emily looked up at him, and she made a decision in that second not to tell him the rest. Not to tell him what her mother had seen. Not to tell him that she'd defended him with words she hadn't rehearsed that had come out of a place she was terrified to look at directly. I told her the truth, Emily said. Like you said. About the copier. About Lily. About who you are. And that was enough. It was more than enough. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, rebuilding herself. You were right. You can't expose a man who's already told you everything. Marcus was watching her a little too closely, and she could tell he sensed there was more, but he didn't push. He never pushed. It was one of the 10,000 things about him she'd been carefully not thinking about for 2 years. So we won, he said. We won this round. Emily checked her watch. But the rehearsal starts in an hour, and Daniel just found out his little poison didn't work. And a man like Daniel doesn't lose gracefully. He escalates. She looked at Marcus. We beat him at the dinner table. We beat him with my mother. He's going to come at us a 3rd time, and it's going to be bigger, and it's going to be in front of the whole family. Marcus nodded slowly. Then let him come. The rehearsal was held in the hotel's grand ballroom, and by the time Marcus and Emily arrived, most of the family was already there milling around the wedding party, finding their places, the coordinator with her clipboard, trying to herd everyone into order. Margaret found them almost immediately, and she did exactly what she'd promised. She took Marcus by both hands in the middle of the room with a dozen relatives close enough to hear, and she said, Marcus, I owe you an apology. Last night I let someone put doubts in my head about you. Doubts you didn't earn and didn't deserve. I judged you before I knew you, and that was wrong of me, and I'm sorry. Her voice carried clear and deliberate, meant to be overheard. Welcome to this family, truly. A few of the aunts nearby made soft sounds. Vanessa, standing off to the side, watched with an expression that had curdled considerably since last night. Marcus, to his enormous credit, didn't gloat. He just held Margaret's hands and said gently, Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore. That means more than you know. Margaret, she corrected. Your family now. It's Margaret. And Emily, watching this, felt something twist painfully in her chest, because it was going so well. It was going so perfectly. And every perfect moment was another brick in a wall that she was going to have to tear down on Sunday, when she told her mother they'd broken up. Her mother, who had just apologized in front of everyone. Her mother, who had just said, Welcome to this family. The better the lie went, the worse the ending would be. And for the first time, Emily let herself feel the full weight of what she'd built. She didn't have long to feel it, though, because that was when Daniel arrived. He came in with the groom laughing about something, and he scanned the room, and his eyes found Emily and Marcus standing with Margaret, being welcomed, being embraced. And Emily watched his face do the math. Watched him register that his phone call had backfired. Watched something cold settle over his features. He knows. Emily murmured to Marcus, I see him. Whatever he does next, don't take the bait. He wants you angry. Angry looks guilty. I know. But Daniel didn't come at them right away. That was the thing about him, he was patient. He worked the room first, shook hands, congratulated the groom, charmed an aunt. And all the while Marcus could feel him circling, waiting for the moment. It came during the rehearsal itself. The coordinator was walking the wedding party through the processional, and there was a lull, the kind of loose social gap where people chat and drift, and Daniel used it. He drifted with a glass of something in his hand over to where Marcus stood near the edge of the room, and this time he didn't lower his voice. This time he wanted an audience. Marcus! Daniel said, loud enough for the cluster of relatives nearby to hear. I have to hand it to you. That was a smooth recovery this morning. Emily talking her mother down. Very impressive. He smiled. You two have really got the story polished. The copier. The 3 weeks to call. It's a good routine. You rehearse it much. The relatives nearby went quiet, heads turned. Marcus felt Emily tense beside him, felt her start to step in, and he put a hand lightly on her arm. "I've got this. I'm not sure what you're accusing me of, Daniel," Marcus said evenly. "I'm not accusing, I'm observing." Daniel took a sip of his drink. "See, I actually know Emily, really know her. Better than a copier repairman could learn in a couple of years of small talk. And the woman I know doesn't fall for the hourly wage single dad from the equipment floor. It's not a snob thing. It's just she's careful. She's guarded. She builds walls for a living." He looked at Marcus with something like pity. "So, either you're the one man on earth who got past all of that, or this is exactly what it looks like." "And what does it look like?" Marcus asked calmly. "An arrangement," Daniel said. The word landed in the middle of the room like a dropped glass. Several relatives were openly watching now. Vanessa had gone very still, a small, satisfied smile beginning at the corner of her mouth. Margaret across the room had turned at the sudden quiet and was moving toward them. And Emily felt the whole thing balanced on a knife's edge, the entire weekend, the entire lie, one wrong word from tipping over. Marcus was quiet for a moment. And then he did something Emily did not expect. He laughed, not a nervous laugh, not a defensive one. A warm, easy, genuinely amused laugh, the kind that makes the accusation sound ridiculous just by existing next to it. "An arrangement," Marcus said, shaking his head, smiling. "Daniel, buddy, look around this room." He gestured, easy and open. "You think I arranged this? You think I'd choose this? I'm a guy who fixes copiers standing in a ballroom full of people who make more money before lunch than I make in a month. I've been quietly terrified since I walked in the door yesterday. Every single person here is out of my league, including especially her." He looked at Emily, and his voice changed, went soft and certain. "You want to know why a careful woman with walls fell for the hourly wage single dad? I've asked myself that every day for 2 years. I still don't have a good answer. All I know is she did. And I'm not going to spend the one weekend I get to stand next to her apologizing to a man who threw her away for being too much woman about whether I'm good enough to keep her." The room was silent. Marcus turned back to Daniel, and now his voice dropped low just for him, but in the quiet, everyone heard it anyway. "You keep saying you know her. You keep saying the real Emily doesn't let people in." Marcus shook his head slowly. "But you're the reason she stopped. You did that. And you've spent this whole weekend trying to prove she's still broken. Because if she's not, if she healed, if she's happy, if she found someone who stayed, then you have to admit that the thing you broke got fixed by somebody better. And you can't stand that." He clapped Daniel once lightly on the shoulder. "It's a good drink. Enjoy the rest of the rehearsal." And he took Emily's hand and walked her toward her mother, leaving Daniel standing alone in the middle of a very quiet room full of people who had just watched him lose. Margaret caught them halfway. "What was that about?" "Nothing, Mom," Emily said. Daniel being Daniel. Margaret's eyes went to Daniel standing alone, and then to Marcus, and something hardened in her face. "I'll speak to the groom," she said quietly. "That man will not be seated anywhere near this family at the wedding tomorrow. I should have done it the moment I saw him on the guest list." She swept off, and Marcus and Emily found themselves in a rare pocket of quiet at the edge of the room. Emily was staring at him. "What?" he said. "You did it again," she said. "Did what?" "The thing where you say something that's supposed to be a performance, and it comes out sounding like the truest thing anyone's ever said." She was looking at him strangely carefully, the way you look at something when you're afraid of what you'll see if you look too long. "You've asked yourself every day for 2 years why a careful woman fell for the hourly wage single dad." Marcus went still, because that had slipped out. That one wasn't from the rehearsed material. That one had come from somewhere real, and he'd said it out loud in front of her, in front of everyone. "It's a good line," he said carefully, "for the character." "Is it a line?" The question hung there. And this was the moment, the second time in 2 days, the ground had tilted toward something neither of them was ready to name. And Marcus opened his mouth, not sure at all what was going to come out of it. And that was when the coordinator clapped her hands and called everyone to the front for the rehearsal of the toast, and the moment shattered. And the both of them exhaled. and neither of them was entirely sure whether it was relief or disappointment. The rest of the rehearsal passed in a blur of processionals and seating charts and the coordinator's clipboard. Marcus played his part, held Emily's chair, laughed at the uncle's jokes, deflected the aunt's questions about the wedding date. And every so often across the room, he caught Daniel watching him no longer with contempt, but with something more dangerous. The look of a man who had lost twice and would not lose a third time quietly. It was nearly 2 o'clock in the afternoon when the rehearsal wrapped and the family began drifting toward the terrace for lunch. Emily pulled Marcus aside near the ballroom doors. "He's not done," she said low. "No. He lost in front of everyone just now. My mother's cut him out of the seating. He's humiliated, and he's the kind of man who'd rather burn the whole thing down than walk away from a fire he started." She looked up at Marcus. "He's going to do something at the wedding tomorrow. Something public. Something he can't take back. Then we'll be ready for it." "Marcus!" Her voice dropped, and something vulnerable came into it. "I need to tell you something. And I need you to not make it weird." His pulse ticked up. "Okay, this morning with my mother?" Emily hesitated. She'd promised herself she wouldn't say this, and now she was saying it anyway. "When I defended you, when I told her who you are, She stopped, started again. "Some of what I said wasn't from the script, and I think she could tell, and I wanted you to know that before tomorrow. Because if this goes sideways at the wedding, if it all comes apart, I don't want you to think that everything I said in there was fake." She looked away. "That's all. That's the whole thing." Marcus's heart was pounding. "Emily, don't," she said quickly. "Please, don't say anything. I shouldn't have just forget I said it. We have a wedding to survive." And she turned and walked toward the terrace, leaving him standing in the ballroom doorway with his heart in his throat and the very clear, very terrifying understanding that the pillow wall between their two sides of the bed had never had a chance. He stood there a moment longer, collecting himself, and when he finally turned to follow her out to the terrace, a voice stopped him. "She told you, didn't she?" Marcus turned. Daniel was leaning against the wall by the door waiting. He'd been waiting the whole time. "Whatever she just told you," Daniel said quietly. "I could see it on her face from across the room. She's starting to believe her own performance." He pushed off the wall. "You want some real advice, copier man to man? No audience this time." He stepped closer. "Get out. Tonight. Before the wedding. Because I know something you don't. I know how this family works when the fairy tale falls apart. And I know Emily. She's going to let herself feel something for you this weekend, because it's convenient, because you're standing right there being noble. And then Monday comes, and the wedding's over, and she goes back to her office and her walls, and you go back to fixing copiers, and she will not call you." His voice was almost gentle now, which made it worse. "I'm not your enemy. I'm the ghost of your future. I stood exactly where you're standing. I believed it too. And she left me standing at an altar with the flowers already paid for." He held Marcus's gaze. "The only difference between us is I got out with an engagement ring. You're going to get out with a broken heart and an hourly wage. So do yourself a favor, drive home tonight. Tell them it didn't work out. Save yourself the version of this where it's real." And for the first time all weekend, Marcus didn't have an answer ready. Because the cruelest thing about what Daniel said was that some small, cold part of him was afraid it might be true. Emily had told him this weekend was one favor, one lie: drive home Sunday. And here he was falling, not pretending to fall, actually falling for a woman who might very well walk back into her glass office on Monday and close the door and leave him exactly where Daniel said he'd end up. Daniel saw the doubt land. He smiled satisfied and walked out to the terrace to join the family, leaving Marcus alone in the empty ballroom with the one thing no performance could protect him from: the truth that he wasn't sure this was going to end the way he needed it to. Marcus stood there for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and he called the one person who always made things simple. "Hi, Daddy." Lily's voice came through bright and unafraid, and something in his chest steadied instantly. "Hey, baby, how's Aunt Karen's?" "We made cookies, and I only ate 3 raw ones, and Aunt Karen said that was too many, but I think 3 is a good number." A pause. "Daddy, are you being fake married still?" Marcus laughed despite everything. "Yeah, baby, still fake married." "Is the pretty boss lady nice to you?" Marcus looked out through the ballroom doors across the terrace to where Emily stood in the afternoon light, laughing at something her aunt had said, glancing back toward the doors every few seconds looking for him. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She's real nice to me." "Good, because if she's mean, I'll fight her." "Nobody's fighting anybody, Lily." "Okay, but I could." "I know you could." He smiled. "I'll be home tomorrow night. I love you. Go easy on the raw cookies." He hung up. And whatever doubt Daniel had planted hearing his daughter's voice had burned most of it away. Because Daniel was a man who ran. Marcus was a man who showed up. That was the whole difference between them, and it always had been. Daniel got out with a ring. Marcus stayed for the broken heart. And if that was the trade, if the price of being the kind of man who stayed was a broken heart on Monday, then Marcus Walker had made that trade a long time ago, the day he decided what kind of man he was going to be. He put his phone away and walked out onto the terrace. Emily saw him coming, and her face changed that small, involuntary softening she probably didn't even know she did, and she stepped away from her aunt to meet him halfway. "There you are," she said. "I was starting to think Daniel got you." "Daniel tried," Marcus said. Her smile faltered. "What did he say?" Marcus looked at her, at this woman who'd told him not 2 hours ago that not everything she'd said was fake, who ran a division of a company and terrified grown men and had defended him to her mother with words that came from somewhere real. "He told me to run," Marcus said, "tonight, before the wedding. He said you'd let yourself feel something this weekend, and then go back to your walls on Monday and never call me." He held her gaze steadily. "He told me to save myself the version where it's real." Emily's face went pale. "And what did you say?" she whispered. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. The terrace was full of her family, close enough to see them too far to hear. "I told him I'm not a man who runs," Marcus said. "I told him that's the whole difference between us. He got out. I stay." He held her eyes. "And I'm not going anywhere tomorrow, Emily. Whatever he tries at that wedding, whatever comes apart, I'm going to be standing right next to you when it does." Emily stared at him, and her eyes filled right there on the terrace in front of her whole family, and she had to look down and blink hard and pretend she'd gotten something in her eye because the truth was crashing into her all at once, and she could not fall apart in front of these people. "You shouldn't say things like that," she said, her voice barely holding. "Why not?" "Because I'm going to start believing them." She looked up at him, and there was something raw and terrified and hopeful in her face, something Daniel had told him he'd never see. And here it was anyway. "And then Monday's going to come, and Marcus, I don't know what happens on Monday. I built this to last one weekend. I never thought about what happens if I don't want it to end." The words hung between them, enormous, undeniable. And before Marcus could answer, before either of them could step over the edge, they'd both been circling for 2 years and 3 days. Margaret's voice cut across the terrace, bright and commanding. "Emily, Marcus, come. We're doing a family photo before lunch, everyone together." And the family closed in around them, pulling them into the group, arranging them shoulder to shoulder, and the photographer called for everyone to smile, and Marcus felt Emily's hand find his and grip it hard, not for the picture, not for the performance, but because she needed something to hold on to. And as the camera flashed, capturing the whole beautiful lie for the family album forever, Marcus Walker understood that tomorrow at the wedding, one of 2 things was going to happen. Either Daniel was going to burn the whole thing to the ground, or Marcus was finally going to tell Emily Whitmore the truth he'd been carrying for 2 years. And standing in the middle of her laughing family, holding her hand, he honestly didn't know which one he was more afraid of. That night back in the suite, neither of them talked about the terrace. They both knew what had almost happened. They both knew what Emily had almost said, what Marcus had almost answered. And by unspoken agreement, they left it exactly where it was hanging in the air between them, too big and too fragile to touch the night before the wedding. "Big day tomorrow," Emily said, sitting on her side of the bed, rebuilding the pillow wall that neither of them believed in anymore. "Big day," Marcus agreed. She turned off the light. And in the dark, after a long silence, she said, "Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you. For today. For all of it. You already thanked me. Last night. Same words. I mean them more tonight." Marcus lay in the dark and listened to her breathe, and he thought about telling her right then. Just saying it. Emily, this stopped being a favor sometime around the copier story. Maybe it stopped being a favor 2 years ago. The words were right there. But she'd said, "Don't" on the terrace. She'd asked him not to make her believe it. So he held it. One more night. "Good night, Emily," he said. "Good night, Marcus." And somewhere in the small hours, without either of them deciding to, the pillow wall ended up on the floor, and when Marcus woke at dawn, Emily's head was on his shoulder, and her hand was resting flat on his chest over his heart, and he lay perfectly still for 20 minutes, because he did not want to wake her, and end the one honest thing that had happened in that bed all weekend. She woke slowly, felt where she was, went rigid. "Marcus." "It's okay," he said quietly. The wall lost. She didn't move for a second. And then, very slowly, instead of pulling away, she let herself settle back down against him just for a moment, just one, and she said into his shirt, "I didn't plan this. I know. Any of it. You. This weekend. The way I—" She stopped. None of it was the plan. "I know, Emily." She pulled back and looked at him, and her hair was a mess, and her makeup was gone, and she had a crease on her cheek from the pillow, and Marcus thought she had never once looked more beautiful, not in 2 years, not in any boardroom, not in any dress. "We have to get up," she whispered. "The wedding." "Yeah. After the wedding, we need to talk. Really talk, about Monday, about all of it." Her eyes searched his. "Can we do that tonight when this is over?" "Yes," Marcus said. "Tonight. When it's over." Neither of them knew in that quiet dawn moment that by the time the wedding was over, everything would already have changed. The morning moved fast. The women of the family swept Emily off to get ready with the bridal party, and Marcus was left to dress alone in the suite, tying his tie in the mirror, running through the day, the way he'd run through the dinner 2 nights ago. Where Daniel would be. What Daniel might try. He'd promised Emily he'd be standing next to her when it came apart, and he intended to keep that promise, but a promise doesn't tell you what the attack will look like. It was 11:40 in the morning when the first strange thing happened. A knock at the suite door. Marcus opened it to find Vanessa standing there, Emily's sister, alone. "Can I come in?" she asked. Every instinct Marcus had said no, but he stepped back and let her in. Vanessa walked to the middle of the room and turned to face him, arms crossed, and for a moment she just studied him. "I've spent this whole weekend trying to figure you out," she said. "And I couldn't. And that bothered me. Because I'm good at figuring people out." She tilted her head. "But this morning I finally got it. You know what I realized? I have a feeling you're going to tell me. You're not lying." Vanessa said it flatly, almost accusingly. "That's what threw me off. I kept waiting for the crack to tell the moment the story fell apart. And it never came. And I couldn't understand why." Her arms tightened. "And then I watched you at breakfast looking at my sister when she didn't know you were looking. And I understood. You're not lying about loving her. You might be lying about a lot of things. I still don't fully buy the fairy tale, but that part's real. You're actually in love with her." Marcus said nothing. "Here's the thing you need to understand about my sister," Vanessa continued, and something shifted in her voice, the sharpness draining out of it, replaced by something more tired, more honest. "Everyone thinks she's the strong one, the successful one, the one who has it all together. And I let them think that because it was easier for me if she was the one who had everything, and I was the one people felt sorry for. She looked away. But I know the truth. Emily has spent her entire life believing she isn't lovable, that people only want her for the name and the money and the title. Daniel confirmed it for her 4 years ago, and she's never recovered. She just built the walls higher and told everyone it was strength. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked. Vanessa met his eyes. "Because if you're lying," she said, "if any part of this is a game, if you're going to walk away on Monday and leave her worse than Daniel did, then walk away now. Today. Before the wedding. Because she can survive being left by a con man. She cannot survive being left by a good one." Her voice cracked just slightly. "She's my sister. I've been terrible to her our whole lives. And I am asking you, if you don't mean it, don't be the thing that finally breaks her." The room was silent, and Marcus realized with a jolt that this was the twist he hadn't seen coming, that the sister he'd been braced to fight all weekend wasn't the enemy at all. She was just another person who loved Emily and didn't know how to say it. "Vanessa," he said quietly, "I'm going to tell you the truth. And I'm only telling you because you clearly love her more than you've ever let her see." He took a breath. "This started as a favor. Emily asked me to pretend, and I said yes because she's my friend and she was in trouble." He held her gaze. "But I stopped pretending somewhere around Thursday. I don't know exactly when it happened. I just know that I'm not acting anymore, and I haven't been for days, and if she walks back into her office on Monday and closes the door, it's going to be me standing outside it with the broken heart, not the other way around." He shook his head. "So no, I'm not going to walk away. I couldn't if I tried." Vanessa stared at him for a long moment, and then to his complete shock, her eyes filled and she pressed a hand to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "She actually found one." She laughed, wet and disbelieving. "She actually found a real one, and she doesn't even believe it's real." "She's starting to," Marcus said. "I think. Maybe." Vanessa wiped her eyes fast, angry at herself for the tears pulling her composure back together, the exact same way Emily did, and Marcus saw for the first time how much these two sisters were alike under all the years of competition. "Okay," Vanessa said. "Okay. Then you need to know something. And you need to know it before the ceremony." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Daniel came to me last night, after the rehearsal, after you humiliated him." Marcus went cold. "What did he want?" "He wanted my help." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "He knows my mother apologized to you. He knows the poison didn't work, so he's changing tactics. He's not going to try to prove you're a gold digger anymore. That failed." She looked at Marcus grimly. "He's going to try to prove the engagement is fake. Publicly. During the reception. He's got some plan. He wouldn't tell me the details. He just wanted to know if I'd back him up when he made his move. If I'd be the one to confirm that Emily was never really engaged." Marcus's stomach dropped. "And what did you say?" "I said yes," Vanessa admitted. The words hit the room like a slap. "Last night I said yes." Vanessa went on quickly. "Because last night I still thought this was a game, and part of me, the ugly part, the part I hate, part of me still wanted to see my perfect sister fall. But then this morning I watched you look at her." She shook her head. "So I'm telling you now so you're not blindsided. Daniel is going to try something at the reception. Something public. And he thinks he has me. He thinks I'm going to stand up and confirm it." She lifted her chin. "I'm not. But he doesn't know that yet. And I don't know exactly what he's planning, only that it's coming and it's going to be in front of 200 people during my cousin's wedding." Marcus stood very still, his mind racing. "Does Emily know?" "No. And you can't tell her." Vanessa grabbed his arm. "Marcus, listen to me. If you tell her before the ceremony, she'll spend the whole wedding terrified, watching the doors waiting for it. She'll fall apart. You know how she is. She'll try to control it, get ahead of it, and she'll tip Daniel off, that we know, and then he'll just change the plan again." She held his eyes. "The only way to beat him is to let him make his move and be ready for it. She has to get through the ceremony first. Let her have that. Let her have the vows and the flowers, and one beautiful hour before he tries to burn it down. Marcus knew she was right, and he hated it. So I have to stand next to her all through the ceremony, he said slowly, knowing what's coming at the reception, and let her think everything's fine. Yes. And when he makes his move, then you do what you've been doing all weekend, Vanessa said. You tell the truth, whatever the truth is. She let go of his arm and stepped back. I have to go. They'll notice I'm gone. Just be ready. And Marcus. She paused at the door. Whatever happens out there, thank you for being real. She deserved a real one. And she slipped out. Marcus stood alone in the sweet tie, half-knotted, heart pounding. He had 1 hour. 1 hour to stand beside Emily through her cousin's wedding, hold her hand, smile for the family, and say nothing about the ambush he now knew was waiting on the other side of it. 1 hour to let her be happy before Daniel tried to take it all away. He finished tying his tie. His hands were steady. And somewhere in that hour, a decision formed in him, quiet and certain. If Daniel wanted to make this public, if he wanted to stand up in front of 200 people and try to prove that Marcus Walker and Emily Whitmore were a lie, then Marcus was going to give him a truth so big it would swallow the lie whole. He just had to survive the ceremony first. The wedding was beautiful, and Marcus barely saw any of it. He sat beside Emily in the third row, her hand in his, and he watched her watch her cousin get married. And he watched the joy on her face, the unguarded softness, the way she leaned into him without thinking about it. And the whole time underneath his heart was hammering with the knowledge of what was coming, and he had to fight to keep his face calm because she kept glancing at him and smiling, and he could not let her see. Twice she leaned over and whispered something. Isn't she gorgeous? My aunt is already crying. Small warm nothings, and twice. Marcus smiled and squeezed her hand and said nothing about Daniel seated now in the very back row where Margaret had banished him, watching the two of them the whole time with a patience that made Marcus's skin crawl. At 1:20 in the afternoon, the couple was pronounced married, and the room erupted, and Emily jumped to her feet, clapping with tears in her eyes, and Marcus stood beside her, and clapped too, and for one moment, one single moment, he let himself forget what was coming, and just be happy standing next to her. Then the recessional started, and the family began flowing toward the reception ballroom, and the countdown began. The reception was everything a Whitmore event would be: enormous. Elegant, a room full of round tables and candlelight, and 200 people in their finest. Marcus and Emily were seated at the family table near the front, and Daniel Marcus, checked immediately, was somewhere in the back out of sight, which was worse than having him in view. You okay? Emily asked, noticing his tension as they sat. You seem far away. I'm fine. Big crowds, not my natural habitat. She smiled and took his hand under the table. Almost done. Dinner, some toasts, a few dances, and then we've survived it. And then, her eyes met his. We talk. Tonight, like we said. Tonight? Marcus agreed and hated the weight of it. Dinner was served. The toasts began. The best man told a long story. The maid of honor cried. And with each toast, each speech, Marcus felt the tension winding tighter, because a wedding reception has an open microphone. And an open microphone was exactly the kind of thing a man like Daniel would use. It happened at 2:47 in the afternoon. The formal toasts had wound down. The coordinator had just announced that in a few minutes the couple would have their first dance. And in the loose, happy gap between the toasts and the dancing, when the microphone was sitting unattended on its stand near the head table, Daniel stood up. Marcus saw him move, felt his whole body go tight. Emily, he said quietly, urgently, look at me. Whatever happens in the next 5 minutes, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She turned to him, confused, alarmed. Marcus, what? But Daniel had already reached the microphone. He picked it up, tapped it. The sound cut across the room, and heads turned. Sorry, Daniel said, smiling his charming smile, holding up a hand. I know it's not my place. I'm just a friend of the groom, but I have something I need to say, and I think everyone here deserves to hear it. The room quieted. 200 faces turned toward him. At the family table, Margaret went rigid. Vanessa's hand tightened on her water glass. And Emily. Emily had gone white, her hand crushing Marcus's under the table because she understood a half second before it came exactly what was about to happen. "This is a weekend about love," Daniel said, walking slowly, working the room like he'd worked it 2 nights ago. "About honesty. About 2 people standing up in front of everyone and telling the truth about how they feel. And in the spirit of that honesty," his eyes found Emily, and his smile turned to something colder. "I think it's time somebody told the truth about the other couple in this room." A murmur went through the crowd. "Everyone here has spent this weekend congratulating Emily Whitmore on her engagement," Daniel went on. "Her whirlwind romance. The copier repairman who swept her off her feet. It's a beautiful story." He paused. "It's also completely fake." The murmur became a wave. Emily started to rise. Marcus put his hand on her arm, "Not yet," and she froze. "I know Emily," Daniel said. "I was engaged to her, and I know for a fact that this woman does not fall in love in a weekend. She doesn't fall in love at all. So I did some asking around, and here's what I found out." He turned, addressing the whole room, now relishing it. "This man," he pointed at Marcus, "is not her fiancé. He's her employee. He works in the equipment department of her company. He fixes her copiers. And 2 weeks ago, nobody in this family had ever heard his name. She hired him, or she asked him. Either way, she brought a fake fiancé to this wedding to save face because she couldn't stand to show up alone, and she has been lying to every single person in this room all weekend long." He set his jaw. "I have proof, and I'm not the only one who knows." His eyes swept to the family table. "Vanessa, you told me yourself last night. Tell them. Tell them the truth." Every head in the room turned to Vanessa. Emily turned too, her face a mask of horror and betrayal. And Marcus watched her look at her sister and brace for the killing blow. Vanessa stood up slowly. The room held its breath. "You're right, Daniel," Vanessa said. Emily made a small broken sound. "I did tell you something last night." Vanessa continued, her voice ringing clear across the silent ballroom. "I told you I'd back you up. I told you I'd help you prove my sister was a liar." She looked around the room at all the watching faces and then at Emily. "Because I have spent my whole life jealous of her. Because it was easier to tear her down than to admit that my perfect, successful sister was actually the loneliest person I knew. So yeah, last night I said yes to you." She turned to face Daniel fully. "But then this morning I talked to Marcus," Vanessa said. "And I watched the way he looks at her. And I realized something you never figured out in all the years you knew her, Daniel." Her voice hardened into something fierce. "You keep saying Emily doesn't fall in love, that she can't. But that's not true. She just never fell in love with you. And you've spent 4 years so angry about it that you flew across the country to humiliate her at a wedding in front of her whole family because you cannot stand that she found something real after you threw her away." Vanessa's chin lifted. "So no, I won't help you. I take it back. Every word." The room was electric, dead silent, 200 people frozen. Daniel's face had gone red. "This is exactly what she does," he said louder now, losing his composure. "She turns everyone. She's turned her own sister. But it doesn't change the facts. He's an employee. This is fake. Someone tell me I'm wrong." "Emily," he rounded on her, "stand up and tell everyone I'm lying. Go ahead. Tell them this is real. Tell them you love him. I dare you." And there it was. The trap. The thing Daniel had built the whole ambush around. Because he knew he was certain that Emily Whitmore could not stand up in front of 200 people and say she loved a man she'd hired to pretend. He knew she'd freeze. He knew the hesitation itself would be the proof. Emily rose to her feet. Marcus watched her stand, watched her face, watched her open her mouth, and he saw her freeze exactly the way Daniel had bet she would, because she couldn't lie. Not about this, not to this whole room, and the truth was too enormous and too new, and she didn't know if she was allowed to say it, didn't know if Marcus felt it too, didn't know if claiming it out loud would be the biggest lie of the weekend, or the first true thing she'd said in years. And in that frozen half-second, that fatal hesitation, Daniel had been counting on Marcus, stood up beside her. "She doesn't have to tell you anything," Marcus said. Every eye in the room snapped to him. "You want the truth, Daniel? Fine. Here's the truth. And I'll say it because she shouldn't have to defend her heart to the man who broke it." Marcus's voice was calm, and it carried to every corner of that silent room. "You're right about the facts. I do fix copiers. I am her employee. 2 weeks ago her family had never heard my name. And yes, she asked me to come here as her fiancé, and it started as a favor because she didn't want to face all of you alone." He didn't flinch. He didn't lower his eyes. "Every fact you just laid out is true." The room gasped. Emily turned to him stricken because it sounded like surrender. It sounded like he was confirming it, ending it. "But here's the part you got wrong," Marcus continued, and his voice changed, dropped, filled with something that silenced the entire room. "You think you exposed a lie. You didn't. You exposed the moment I stopped acting." He turned to Emily now, only Emily, the 200 people falling away. "It started as a favor. I'm not going to stand here and pretend it didn't. But somewhere between your kitchen on Thursday and this ballroom right now, it stopped being one. And I've spent this whole weekend too scared to say it because you're my boss, and you're a Whitmore, and I'm a guy who fixes copiers, and I was sure I was out of my league." His voice broke just slightly. "But I'm not scared anymore. So I'm going to say it in front of all of these people because you deserve to hear it out loud, at least once in your life. I love you, Emily. Not the fake version. Not the arrangement. You. The woman who came to my apartment terrified and asked me for help. The woman who knows my daughter's favorite color. The real one behind all the walls. I've loved you for longer than this weekend, and I was too much of a coward to say it until a man tried to use it against you." He took her hand. "It's not fake. It stopped being fake days ago, and I don't care who knows it." The room was utterly, completely silent. Emily was crying. Openly in front of everyone, tears streaming down her face, and she wasn't trying to stop them. And Daniel stood at the microphone, his entire plan in ruins, because he'd built the trap to catch a lie, and Marcus had walked into it and turned it into the most public confession of love the room had ever witnessed. "You," Daniel started, "you can't just—" "Sit down, Daniel." Margaret's voice cut across the room like a blade. She had risen from her seat at the family table, and she was looking at Daniel with 4 years of contained fury finally breaking loose. "You came into my family's celebration," Margaret said, her voice shaking with anger. "And you tried to humiliate my daughter. Again. The way you humiliated her 4 years ago, when you left her 11 days before your wedding flowers, I paid for invitations already sent." The room rippled. Half of them hadn't known. "You have spent this entire weekend poisoning me against a good man, and I let you. And I will be ashamed of that for a long time. But no more." She pointed at the door. "You are not welcome here. Leave. Now. Before I have you removed in front of everyone, which I promise you, I will enjoy." Daniel looked around the room, and he found no allies, not one face that would meet his eyes. The groom, his own friend, was staring at the floor. The aunts had turned away, and Vanessa was standing with her arm now around her sister, glaring at him with open contempt. He set the microphone down, and he walked out of the ballroom alone in front of 200 people, exactly the way he'd tried to make Emily feel, and the door closed behind him, and it was over. For a long moment, nobody moved. And then Margaret began to clap, slow at first. Then someone joined her. Then someone else. And then the whole room was on its feet, applauding for Emily, for Marcus, for the copier repairman who'd stood up in a room full of wealthy strangers and refused to let the woman he loved be humiliated. But Marcus barely heard any of it, because he was looking at Emily. And Emily was looking at him. And the applause, and the family, and the whole ballroom had faded to nothing. And there were only the two of them and the enormous unspoken thing that Marcus had just spoken. "You said it." Emily whispered, her voice barely audible over the applause. In front of everyone. You said it was real. It is real, Marcus said. I meant every word. And if you don't feel the same, that's okay. I'll drive you home tomorrow, and I'll never make it weird at the office. I just couldn't let him. Marcus? Yeah. Emily reached up, put both hands on his face, and through her tears, she smiled. The real smile, the one from his kitchen, the one that had wrecked him from the very first day. Shut up, she said, and in front of her mother, her sister. 200 applauding guests, and the empty chair where the man who tried to destroy them had been sitting. Emily Whitmore kissed the man she'd hired to be her fake fiancé. And it was the least fake thing that had ever happened to either of them. The applause somehow got louder. Somewhere, an aunt was sobbing. Margaret had both hands pressed to her chest. Vanessa was laughing and crying at the same time, and when Emily finally pulled back, her forehead resting against his, she whispered the words that neither of them had ever expected to be true when they'd walked into that hotel 2 days ago pretending. It stopped being fake for me on Thursday too, she said. The moment you opened that door and made me coffee before I even explained why I was crying, I just didn't have the courage to say it until a man dared me to. She laughed wet and disbelieving and free. So here it is in front of everyone. I love you, Marcus Walker, the real one, copiers and all. And Marcus Walker, single father, hourly wage repairman. The man who showed up, pulled her back in, and held her like he was never letting go, while behind them, the newlyweds took the floor for their first dance, and the whole Whitmore family celebrated not one love story that day, but two. But even in that perfect moment, holding the woman he loved in a room full of people who finally believed them, one small, quiet thought sat in the back of Marcus's mind, waiting. They'd told everyone it was real. But they still hadn't talked about Monday. The drive home on Sunday was the quietest 3 hours of Marcus Walker's life. Not a bad quiet, a careful one. The quiet of two people who had said enormous things in front of 200 strangers and now had to figure out what those things meant, with no audience, no Daniel, no family, no performance left to hide behind. Emily sat in the passenger seat with her hands folded in her lap, watching the road, and every few miles Marcus would glance over and catch her almost saying something and then not saying it. Finally, about an hour in, he broke it. You keep starting sentences, he said. I do not. You've opened your mouth about 6 times and closed it again. I fix things for a living. I notice when something's about to jam. She laughed softly, and some of the tension went out of the car. Okay, she said. Fine. Here's the thing I keep not saying. She turned in her seat to face him. Yesterday, in that ballroom, we told 200 people we love each other, and I meant it. I need you to know I meant every word. She took a breath. But we said all of it under the worst possible circumstances. Daniel had a microphone. My mother was watching. There were 200 people and a wedding cake. And I keep thinking, what if we only said it because we were cornered? What if it was real in that room with all that pressure, but out here in a car on a Sunday, with nothing forcing our hand, it turns out to be Emily? Let me finish. I have to say this or I'll never say it. Her voice tightened. I have been left before, you know that. And the way Daniel left me, it didn't just break my heart, it broke something about how I trust. So I need to know out here where nobody's making us. Do you still mean it? Or was it the room? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he did something that surprised her. He pulled the car over, right there onto the shoulder of the highway, put it in park, and turned to face her fully. I'm going to answer that, he said. But first I want you to notice something. There's no microphone, no Daniel, no 200 people. Your mother is 90 miles behind us. It's just you, me, and a car on the side of the road. He held her eyes. And I'm about to say the exact same thing I said yesterday, word for word, because it was never about the room. Emily's breath caught. I love you, Marcus said simply. I loved you before this weekend. I'll love you Monday morning when you walk into your glass office and I walk down to the equipment floor. The room didn't make it true. The room just finally made me brave enough to say it out loud. He reached over and took her hand. I'm not Daniel. I'm never going to be Daniel. I don't run. I show up. I've been showing up for 2 years, and I'm going to keep showing up whether you love me back or not, because that's just who I am. So no. It wasn't the room, Emily. It was never the room. Emily looked at him, and her eyes were wet, and she nodded, and she believed him. She could feel herself believing him, which was almost more frightening than not believing him. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I believe you." She wiped her eyes and laughed shakily. "God, look at me. I run a division of a company. I've closed deals that would make your head spin, and a copier repairman pulls over on the highway, and I fall apart. You didn't fall apart. You asked a hard question, and you listened to the answer. That's not falling apart. That's the bravest thing you've done all weekend, and you fought your ex and your mother and your sister this weekend." Marcus put the car back in drive. "Now buckle up. There's someone at home who's been asking about you for 3 days, and I promised her I'd be back tonight." Emily's head came up. "Lily, she calls you the pretty boss lady. She threatened to fight you if you were mean to me." He pulled back onto the highway. "She's been at my sister's all weekend, and she wants to meet the woman I've apparently been fake marrying, which is going to be a fun conversation, because now I have to explain the part where it stopped being fake." Emily went quiet, and Marcus glanced over, worried he'd pushed too fast. "Is that too much?" he asked. "Meeting her, today. I know it's fast, we can—" "No," Emily said quickly. "No, it's not too much." She looked out the window, and when she spoke again, her voice was small. "It's just Marcus. I've never met a kid's dad's. I mean, I've never been I don't know how to be someone a child looks at as—" She stopped. "What if she doesn't like me?" And Marcus laughed, warm and easy, because of all the things Emily Whitmore was afraid of. This was somehow the one that got under her skin the most. "You terrify grown men in boardrooms," he said. "You stared down your mother over coffee. You survived Daniel, and you're scared of a 7-year-old. Extremely. She already likes you. She's liked you since the morning you drove her to school. You just don't know it yet." He squeezed her hand. "Trust me, I know my kid." 2 hours later, Marcus pulled up outside his sister Karen's house, and before he'd even turned off the engine, the front door flew open, and a small blur in a purple shirt came barreling down the walk. "Daddy!" Marcus got out just in time to catch her swinging Lily up into his arms, and she wrapped her whole body around him like a koala, and Marcus closed his eyes and breathed her in, and Emily, still sitting in the car, watched the two of them through the windshield, and felt something crack open in her chest that she didn't have a name for. "I ate too many raw cookies again," Lily announced. "But only 4 this time, Aunt Karen said," and then she stopped mid-sentence because she'd spotted Emily getting out of the car. Her whole body went still. She looked at Emily. She looked at her father. She looked back at Emily. "Daddy," Lily whispered in the least quiet whisper in the history of whispers. "That's the pretty boss lady." "It is," Marcus said, setting her down. "Is she still fake?" Marcus crouched down to Lily's level, and he took a breath, and Emily held hers. "No, baby," Marcus said gently. "She's not fake anymore. She's real now. Is that okay?" Lily considered this with the enormous seriousness only a 7-year-old can bring to a life-altering question. She looked at Emily for a long moment, and Emily, who had negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts without breaking a sweat, stood frozen on the sidewalk, waiting for the verdict of a child in a purple shirt. "Do you know how to play Uno?" Lily finally asked. Emily blinked. Yes. Yes, I know how to play Uno." "Are you good at it?" "I'm very good at it, actually." Lily narrowed her eyes. "Better than Daddy." "Hey," Marcus said. Emily crouched down slowly, coming to Lily's level, and for the first time in the whole exchange, something confident came back into her face, because this at least she could do honestly. "I'm better than your daddy at almost everything," Emily said seriously. "But don't tell him I said that." Lily's face split into a huge gap-toothed grin, and she turned to her father with the delight of a child who has just found an ally. "I like her," Lily declared. "Can she stay for dinner? And Marcus looked at Emily crouched on the sidewalk next to his daughter, the woman who ran a company and had cried on the highway and was now being interrogated about Uno, and he thought his heart might actually break from how full it was. "Yeah, baby," he said. "She can stay for dinner." Dinner at Karen's turned into the easiest night Emily could remember in years. There was no performance, no family watching for cracks, no Daniel, just a loud, warm kitchen, and Karen who took one look at Emily and one look at her brother and clearly figured out the whole story in about 4 seconds, and Lily who insisted Emily sit next to her and spent the entire meal telling her about second grade in exhaustive detail, and Emily who had spent her whole life being the successful one, the guarded one. The one people wanted for her name sat in a small kitchen that smelled like garlic bread and let a 7-year-old talk her ear off, and realized she had never in her life felt more like a person and less like a resume. Later, after Lily had crashed hard on the couch mid-sentence and Karen had carried her off to bed, Marcus and Emily stood in the kitchen doing dishes side by side, and it was the most married either of them had felt all weekend, which was strange because there was nobody left to perform for. "Can I tell you something?" Emily said, drying a plate. "Always. This is the part I was scared of. Not the wedding, not Daniel, not my mother." She set the plate down. "This, the regular part. The kitchen, and the dishes, and the kid asleep on the couch. Because the fancy version, the boardroom version, I know how to do that. But this..." She gestured around the little kitchen. "I never thought I'd get this. Daniel told me I was too much married to my job. My mother told me I waited too long. Everybody had a reason why the regular happy life wasn't for me, and I believed them." She looked at him. "And now I'm standing in your sister's kitchen drying a plate, and I feel like I finally walked into a room I've been locked out of my whole life." Marcus set down the dish he was holding. He turned to her, took the towel out of her hands and set it on the counter. "You were never locked out," he said. "You just kept meeting men who couldn't find the door." He put his hands on her waist. "I've known where the door was for 2 years. I was just waiting for you to be ready to walk through it." Emily's eyes filled again. "You're going to have to stop saying things like that, or I'm going to cry in your sister's kitchen." "Cry in my sister's kitchen? It's a good kitchen. It's seen worse." And she laughed and she leaned into him, and for a long moment they just stood there. Two people who had walked into a lie and walked out with the truth. Then Emily pulled back and her face changed, and Marcus recognized the look the strategist coming back online. "There's still Monday," she said. "I know. I'm serious, Marcus. Everything that happened this weekend was outside the real world. But Monday, I'm your boss again. You report up through my division. There are rules about this. HR policies. There are people who will say I gave you special treatment, that you're only in your job because of me, that..." She stopped, frustrated. "The thing Daniel tried to make everyone believe. Some version of that is going to follow us into that building. And I won't do that to you. I won't let you become the guy who's only there because he's sleeping with the director." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "So what do you want to do?" he asked. "I don't know. That's the truth. I've closed billion-dollar deals, and I don't know how to solve this one, because for the first time in my life, the thing I want and the thing that's smart are pointing in opposite directions." She leaned back against the counter. "The smart thing is we keep it quiet. Hide it. Sneak around for a year until it's less complicated. And the thing you want..." Emily looked at him. "I'm tired of hiding, Marcus," she said. "I spent this whole weekend pretending, and the only moments that felt real were the ones where I told the truth. I don't want to spend the next year lying again. I just got done lying." She shook her head. "I don't want to sneak. I've never wanted anything less." Marcus nodded slowly, and then he said the thing he'd been thinking about since the highway. "Then I'll transfer out of your division," he said. Emily's head came up. "What number, Marcus? That's your..." "It's not a demotion. Hear me out." He leaned against the counter next to her. "The equipment department services the whole company, not just your division. There's no rule that says which director I report through. If I move my line over to operations, then you're not my boss anymore. You're just a woman I'm dating who happens to work in the same building. No policy, no special treatment. No leverage for anyone who wants to whisper. He shrugged. Same job, same pay, same copiers, different name at the top of the org chart. And nobody gets to say you're helping me climb because you won't have any power over my career at all. Emily stared at him. You'd do that, she said slowly. You'd rearrange your whole job so that people can't gossip about me. I'd do a lot more than that, Emily. This is just the easy one. He looked at her. You spent your whole life afraid people only wanted you for your title and your name and your power over things. So let me be the guy who arranged his life specifically so I'd have none of that from you. I don't want your title. I don't want your name. I don't want anything you can do for my career. I want the woman who plays Uno and cries on highways. He smiled. Making sure I report to operations is just how I prove it. And that undid her more than the ballroom had. Because in the ballroom, he'd said he loved her. Here in a kitchen with dish soap on his hands, he was showing her rearranging the actual architecture of his life so that no one could ever again make her doubt she was loved for the right reasons. Emily didn't say anything. She couldn't. She just stepped forward and put her arms around him and held on, and Marcus wrapped her up and held her right back, and they stood in his sister's kitchen for a long, long time. Monday came, and it was in the end almost anticlimactic. Emily filed the transfer paperwork herself first thing before the doubts could creep back in. She walked it down to operations personally. And when the operations director asked mildly why she was rerouting an equipment tech out of her own division, Emily looked her dead in the eye and said, "Because I'm dating him, and I won't have anyone say he's here because of me." And she watched the director's eyebrows go up, and she waited for the judgment, and it didn't come. The director just smiled and said, "Good for you, Emily. Took you long enough to want something for yourself." By lunchtime, the whole building knew. Of course it did. But here was the thing Emily hadn't expected. The whispers she'd braced for her whole life, they didn't come the way she feared. Because the story that spread wasn't, "The director is dating the copier guy." The story that spread, carried by 3 cousins who'd been at the wedding and couldn't stop talking about it, was about a man who'd stood up in front of 200 people and refused to let the woman he loved be humiliated, and then quietly transferred his own job so no one could accuse her of favoritism. And it turned out that a whole building full of people who'd spent years finding Emily Whitmore cold and untouchable were quietly deeply moved to discover she was a person after all. A person somebody had chosen. A person somebody had rearranged his life to love properly. The woman at the front desk, who'd worked there 11 years and never once seen the director smile, told Emily she was happy for her and meant it. Marcus found Emily at the end of that first day in her glass office, standing at the window, the way she used to when she thought no one was watching. Except this time he knocked, and this time she turned around, and she was smiling. "Different building rules now," he said, leaning in the doorway. "I checked. I don't report to you anymore, so I'm allowed to do this." And he crossed the office and kissed her right there in the glass office where anyone walking by could see. And someone did walk by. And Emily didn't pull away. And that more than anything was how she knew she was finally done hiding. They didn't rush the rest of it. There was no whirlwind, no second fake anything. Just a man and a woman and a little girl building something slow and real, the way Marcus built everything by showing up. He showed up. Every day. He showed up when Emily worked late and he brought her dinner. He showed up when Lily had her school play and Emily sat in the second row, and Lily found her face in the crowd and waved at the pretty boss lady who wasn't fake anymore. He showed up. Margaret came around completely, of course. Within a month she was calling Marcus more than she called her own daughter, and she told everyone who would listen the story of how her Emily had finally found a real one, conveniently editing out the part where she'd nearly let Daniel destroy it. "I knew the moment I saw them in that lobby," she'd say. "A mother knows." Emily let her have it. Some lies are kind. Vanessa came around too, which was the bigger surprise. The 2 sisters who'd spent a lifetime as rivals had watched each other at that wedding. Vanessa standing up for Emily against Daniel. Emily seeing for the first time that her sister's cruelty had always been fear in disguise, and something old and hard between them had finally cracked. They weren't perfect. But they started calling, started meaning it. And Lily got a whole set of cousins out of the deal, which she considered the single greatest development of her entire life. Daniel, they never heard from again. He'd left that ballroom alone in front of 200 people, exactly the way he'd tried to make Emily feel 4 years ago, and again that weekend. And the strange thing was that Emily didn't hate him anymore. She'd spent 4 years believing his lie, that she was unlovable, that she was too much, that she'd driven him away by being who she was. And in the end, he'd flown across the country to prove that lie one more time, and instead, he'd handed her the truth. Because it was Daniel's dare. Daniel's cruelty that had finally forced Marcus to stand up and say it out loud. If Daniel had never grabbed that microphone, Marcus might have carried that love silently for another 2 years. So in the strangest, most backward way, the man who'd tried to destroy them was the reason they'd found each other at all. Emily thought about that sometimes. How the worst thing in the room had cracked open the best thing in her life. How the lie she'd told out of fear had walked her straight into the truth she'd been running from. How she'd spent 39 years being wanted for her name, and it had taken a fake engagement to a copier repairman to finally be wanted for her heart. She thought about it most on the day, almost a year later, when Marcus took her back to that same hotel. He didn't tell her why. He just said he wanted to take her away for the weekend, the two of them, and she should pack a nice dress. And Emily, who now trusted this man more than she'd ever trusted anyone, packed the dress and asked no questions. They pulled up to the same lobby where Margaret had cried and handed them a key card a year before. And Emily laughed when she recognized it. "You brought me back to the scene of the crime," she said. "I did." "Why?" Marcus took her hand and walked her inside up to the front desk, and the clerk handed him a key card, and he held it up between 2 fingers, the exact way he had a year ago. "Garden Suite," he said. "I booked it myself this time." Emily's heart did something complicated. "Marcus. 1 bed," he added, grinning. "On purpose. No mother required." She laughed, but her eyes were already wet, because she could feel where this was going the way you feel a storm before it breaks. He walked her up to that same suite, same room where they'd built a pillow wall neither of them believed in, where the wall had ended up on the floor by morning, where 2 people who were pretending had accidentally stopped pretending. And when they stepped inside, Marcus turned to her and took both her hands. "A year ago," he said, "we walked into this room as a lie. And by the time we left, it was the truest thing in my life." His voice was steady, but she could hear the emotion running under it. "You asked me on the highway if it was real or if it was just the room. So I brought you back to the room, because I wanted to prove something to you." He got down on one knee. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. "Last time we were here, your mother handed us a fake engagement," Marcus said, and his own eyes were shining now. "I'm here to fix that, because I unjam things for a living, and this one's been jammed for a year, and I'm ready to make it work right." He reached into his pocket. "Emily Whitmore, I'm a single father who fixes copiers. I'm not rich. I'm never going to be. But I have loved you since before I had any right to, and I've shown up every single day since, and I am going to keep showing up for the rest of my life if you'll let me." He opened the box. "Will you be my fiancé, the real one this time? On purpose. No emoji required." And Emily Whitmore, the youngest regional director of Whitmore Industries, the woman everyone called cold, the woman who had once been left 11 days before her wedding and spent 4 years believing she was unlovable. Emily Whitmore dropped to her knees on the floor of that garden suite, took the face of the copier repairman in both her hands, and through tears and laughter said the truest words she had ever said in her life. Yes, they were married 8 months later in a small ceremony with a big heart. Margaret cried the entire time and took full credit for the whole thing. Vanessa was the maid of honor and gave a toast that made the room weep. And Lily, in a purple dress because she refused to wear anything else, was the flower girl. And she took the job so seriously that she rationed the petals to make sure they'd last the whole aisle. There were no fake stories that day, no performances, no walls. Just a man who showed up and a woman who finally let herself be loved, and a little girl who'd gotten a mother out of a copier that jammed on the worst day of somebody's quarter. And on their wedding night in a hotel room that had one bed on purpose, Emily lay with her head on Marcus's chest over the heart she'd once slept beside, pretending, and she said, "Do you ever think about how it almost didn't happen? How I almost showed up to that wedding alone? How I almost picked someone else to ask? How Daniel almost—" "No," Marcus said simply. "No, I don't think about the almosts." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Because the almosts didn't happen. You came to my apartment. You asked me. I said yes. Daniel picked up that microphone and handed me the courage I'd been missing. And now you're here, and I'm here, and that little girl down the hall calls you Mom." He tightened his arm around her. "There's no almost, Emily. There's just this. And this is the only thing that was ever real." And Emily Whitmore Walker closed her eyes and let herself believe it fully finally, without a single wall left standing. Because she had spent her whole life being wanted for what she had. And in the end, on the far side of one small lie, she had found the one man who only ever wanted her. That was the truth neither of them had been ready to admit the day they walked into that hotel pretending. And it turned out to be the only truth that ever mattered.